Hare Krishna. Please accept my humbly offered obeisances. Vanchikalpa Tirishaki Kasabhuvari Namaha Vaishnava Namaha. So I'm happy to again be part of the Canadian retreat. I think now it's my good fortune, third year to be with you. And Hare Krishna. I actually had something else totally, at least mentally prepared. And then, as does happen in devotional life, I came across something that was very extraordinary. And this is Vyasaputami Srila Prabhupada in 1997 by His Grace Ravindranath Prabhu. And I can paraphrase, which I will to some extent, but the words of the author are so clear, so succinct, and so brilliant, I want to share them with you. But I also have some other personal comments, which I will also share. But this is a wonderful thing in devotional life. Guru Parampara means you hand down unadulterated what you have learned, what you hear. So, in the secular world, they would call that, you're taking, there's a word for that, you take from somebody else, you use it. Huh? I can't, unfortunately. No, but there's a word, like yes. You plagiarize something. Well, in devotional life, that is what we're supposed to do, but it's called, parampara. You take it, you pass it on, you don't add, you don't subtract, So I want to, plagiarize without plagiarizing the offering of Virgin's Root. I had the blessings of his team because I got through last night. I was able to get through and get a hold of one of them, and they were so happy that I wanted to share that because they were the ones who came up with the idea that you should do that reading, and I will have it quite shortened. Om Jnanandasya Dhanana Sakala Chakra Sri Namaha. We all know Prabhupada's pronounced all together. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Name Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Katarini Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shiva Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, having some reflections from Guru Das's wonderful and it was an enlightening presentation this morning. Like people weren't falling asleep. You mentioned about wanting to hear about the Advent of Lord Jagannath, but that's another time, I think, because there's time frame here. But you were talking about people not getting it, and also Bhakti Maharaj this morning was talking about people not getting it. You're trying this, you're trying that to explain to one or the other, somehow they would not be getting it, Which doesn't mean we have to dumb down our philosophy, but we do have to find ways of conveying the truth in a way that maybe they will get it, But don't be surprised if they don't. Even Prasadam, I think that was brought up. There was such an incident in Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh where Srila Prabhupada was invited to speak. The people just didn't get it, and they were very restless, and they were making, I don't know if you can hear this mic. It goes into my ears. I have it off, I have it on off, but this is an alarm to remind me about Gayatri. So either we can take a Gayatri break right now, or I'll do it later. So he's speaking, and people were not getting it, and they were restless. This has happened in several places. So on that occasion, because, okay, kirtan, you just cut it short. Okay, kirtan, shift gears. But they still were restless. So he cut it short and served prasadam. In Paris one time, beautiful place. I mean, it was a top class venue. And Prabhupada's Vyasa sign was brought in, he's on the stage, the ladies on one side, the men on the other. And he's speaking, and there was just somebody heckling, and Prabhupada said, what does he want? And the devotee said, most of know why you're sitting on that throne. And then Prabhupada said, oh, you would like to sit on this? Yes, you can, provided you learn the knowledge of the Vedas. And then if you learn that, then you're qualified to speak and you can sit here. However, after that incident, Prabhupada told the devotees to stop because he loved those big old Vyasa signs everywhere. Even to airports, and he said, just stop that. Because he could see it was a distraction. He has a message that was really important, but they're distracted by these, huge Vyasa signs that we used to make. There was one such person who we thought he wasn't getting it. And this was in London. The situation was we were living at John Lennon's estate, and in order to come into London for the program, Conway Hall, you mentioned the program, we had hired a vehicle. The little truck that it wasn't a pickup, it was a flatbed truck, but Shamsuna made a canopy over it, and then the devotees would cram into that little thing, which did have to be started like this, a crank. They would come like that, but Prabhupada had this rented car, and it came with a driver, and the driver's name was Eddie. And it was, I don't forget how many programs, but 1, 2, 3 in a week, and Eddie would be the driver. And he was just like, this ordinary, we say British bloke, that's our slang, a bloke. Didn't seem like he had any interest in what we were doing. We were certainly not his ordinary type of passengers. He's coming out of Ascot, which was, where the estate of John Lennon's was. So this is, high-end type people were, pretty much high-level suit and tie like people. And, we couldn't even get socks to match if we had socks. So, but he never, just opened the door, shut the door, drove the car. And in this hall, Conway Hall, which, I think there's a series of recordings, Conway Hall, series. So it was our first introduction of Prabhupada to the British public. And he would come in, and on the stage, there was a chair. It wasn't a big, huge Vyasa sign because we didn't have any at that point yet. We were still without our own zip code. Although we hadn't gotten very place, we weren't living there. There wasn't, it was getting rehabbed for living and making it into a temple. So the devotees would be up on the stage with Srila Prabhupada. And it was a general, he was on sandwich, there would be a kirtan, Prabhupada would speak, there would be another kirtan, and then some, we had no books to give out, but we would meet and greet the guests, give them prasadam. The Prabhupada generally didn't stay. And I had a baby. Babies are not known for having any active interest in spiritual philosophical topics. In fact, even some of us, if truth be told, have a hard time maintaining that interest. And Saraswati at that point was a baby, so she wasn't getting up on the stage and dancing, and that came a little later, she was like in my arms. So I would go back with Srila Prabhupada and his servant, and my reason for going back was that I was going to cook his evening prasadam, which was generally a fairly simple affair. Some puris, maybe some puffies, and maybe some, potatoes completely boiled and seasoned. I was in TA, total anxiety, in case my kid would I even went to a chemist, that's what they call the pharmacies there. Is there anything to keep a child quiet? And they have these things, I see every baby has these things in their mouth now, it's like a plug, right? They stick it in the mouth, what do you call it, pacifier? In England they call them a dummy. And you can put something in it. So the guy told me to put in, he said, put in some brandy. That wasn't going to happen. So therefore, I just was hoping she would never cry. And it's some kind of miracle, because she never did cry. But I would sit by the back of the door in case that mouth opened up. I was out the door before any sound came out. You can hear tapes where Prabhupada said, keep the child quiet. Or remove the child. I was just listening to a lecture from Bhagavatam the other day, because I found a lecture on the verse I was giving, so I wanted to hear what Prabhupada had to say. And I wanted to hear what he said about the verse before, the lead-in. And there was a comment, Prabhupada said, keep the child quiet. Remove the child. So that precedence was there. Anyway, so on this evening, Prabhupada was giving this kind of really, you're not the body, your spirit, soul, like a basic, 101 KC lecture. And then he stopped at the end, and he nodded to Jamuna to lead the kirtan, which again was not, something out of this world. He did quite often. The thing was, that day, he stayed. He didn't leave. And he's listening to the kirtan, and then he got up and he starts to dance. At this point, I left the back of the hall and I came forward right to the stage, and I'm just looking up at this, Prabhupada was up and dancing. And suddenly it became apparent that his feet were not touching the stage. He was, if you want to say, dancing in air. And the entire audience saw this also. Wow. So they got up. It was just this moment of electrical, spiritual electricity. And there is, Malati, David Dossi, there's a photo of this. So then the kirtan ends, I run to the back to get out, to get in the car, and he's there, he opens the door, and myself and Purushottam get in the car. So the Prabhupada comes out, he opens the door, that's his duty, Prabhupada gets in, he shuts the door, he comes around, he gets in, he takes out his key, and he starts to insert it in the ignition. And suddenly he stopped, and he turned to Prabhupada, he says, well, Prabhupada, his interpretation, well, Prabhupada, you got a little out of control tonight, didn't you? And he nudged him with his elbow. So, we were shocked. Purushottam goes, under his breath to me, rebirth material. We're in the back seat. But then he starts to speak, and he goes, after he said he got a little controls and on, didn't you, Prabhupada? And he said, but it's just like you said. And then he turns the key and he goes, this car is no good without a driver. And then I realized, oh my God, he had been listening, and he got it. He got it that night, so miracles happen, by the miracle of pure love. You were mentioning about Srila Prabhupada cooking, and Srila Prabhupada famously had said, you should dress for others, but cook for yourself. But in other words, he wanted us to appear respectable, and we should, dress for others. May not be tour-like, but dress for others, but cook for yourself. Prabhupadism. And so far as making things understandable, so we knew that Prabhupada wanted the word Sri Radha Krishna Temple over the door, as a signage on the temple. So that was in New York, it was that way. And then when we came to San Francisco, we knew he would like that, so we had Sri Radha Krishna Temple, but we didn't know who was Radha. So we asked him, and he explained in a way that would be understandable for his audience. He said he was looking at us. Radha is Krishna's girlfriend. So that was his way of explaining it. And you were mentioning how we met you, me and Jamuna. It wasn't. Yeah, it was. No, you were mentioning in your talk about how we had met you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, probably had two men, double number. Jamuna and I were taking a walk in the city. And if you really want to know the truth of it, of that walk, where that fateful walk where we met Guru Das and Ketal, we decided to take this is before Swamiji was coming, we decided we will take our last ever LSD trip, which we would usually do in the country, but now we're in the city. So we're just wandering all around, and I wanted to go back, so we were going back. And suddenly this big, ferocious dog was barking at us, and he was kind of coming down the stairs of the stoop, coming at us. And suddenly this tall fellow with a kind of flowing robe on, stood there and said, Ketal, Ketal. Now I thought I knew that meant what in Spanish. So I'm like, what is he saying? What to what? But the dog stopped, and he called him back, So that was Guru Das. And then he invited us up to his pad, his home, his flat. And I didn't want to go, but bless her heart, Jamuna did. And the rest is history on that one. She didn't come home that night. She came home the next day, home we were living with, Shamsun and myself, our dog Ralph. So here's this tall, lanky guy, Guru Das, and his German Shepherd, Ketal, and Jamuna, and Ripple. And then nowadays we talk a lot about strategic planning. There's dedicated groups for strategic planning. But back in those days, we had no idea of that terminology. But it doesn't mean strategic planning didn't happen. It actually did. And you referenced it when you kept saying, Swami is coming, Swami is coming. We got this idea we have to let the people in San Francisco know that the Swami would be coming. And, but we didn't know when, and neither did we know where, because we didn't have a zip code, we didn't have an address yet. So we were passing out these flyers, Swamiji is coming. And then the Maha Mantra, please chant Hare Krishna, stay high forever, no more coming down. Swamiji is coming. And we're passing these out all over the place, particularly in the Ashbury, where all the action was. And then we got an address. So then we upped the thing. Swamiji is coming to 518 Frederick Street. Chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. And by the way, we practically didn't know the words of the mantra in the proper order, so we carried around this little flyer so we could say the mantra properly. So, stay high forever, no more coming down. And then finally we got a date. Swamiji is coming to 518 Frederick Street, January, I think it was 17th. San Francisco, have the mantra, stay high forever, no more coming down, everyone is welcome. So at that airport, there was quite a few people that did come because of this strategic planning. And we didn't really know what a Swami was or what that meant. What does it mean, a Swami? So our idea was, our thoughts were, somebody mystical, somebody magical, somebody who probably was going to be really big. And although we had heard from Mukunda about him, we hadn't actually, there was no pictures that we had seen yet, and no explanation. So when he did arrive, he was the last person off the plane, and it was kind of became blinding. And I thought, oh, it's the news people, because they had these big box cameras with big flashes, and they were just kind of like dressed like, stereotype with, some kind of jacket, coat, not a jacket, coat with a belt, belted coat and big box cameras. I thought the blindingness was from the cameras, but at the same time, somehow or other, I found myself on the ground, and I didn't know how I got there, and it wasn't obeisances because we didn't know about those yet. And I'm trying to, what am I doing on the ground? And I lift my head up, and right in front of me at that moment, I see these white plastic pointy-toe shoes kind of gliding by, and I looked up, and there was this brilliantly effulgent, not very big personality. Swamiji was there. And right behind him was my dog Ralph. And I remember thinking, that Ralph had more, maybe was smarter than I was, so I should just get up and, and people started following. Instead of somebody taking him, you go this way, it was kind of interesting. Everybody just started following Swami. And when we came out, he mentioned Haridas, it wasn't Haridas, it Hari Cohen. He had this black Cadillac. He wouldn't let us ride in the Cadillac. It was, you're not going to ride on the Cadillac. But the Krishna car, a 54 Ford, which had been a donation. Now, if somebody's giving you something for nothing, there's got to be a few catches to it. So the few catches to this car were that the bonnet, the hood, would not stay down. It would fly up unexpectedly at any moment. And the driver's seat was kind of tilted back. It was like the whole front of the car was like a bench thing, but it was tilted back, so you couldn't, the driver had to hold that wheel to stay upright. So, but we had a stencil, and we stenciled Hare Krishna in different colors all over the car. So, he walked into the car, and I'm thinking, some people were thinking, wow, he knows the car. Well, was it a surprise? There was Hare Krishna all over, But he had to ride in Haridas's car, and he was taken to the little temple white, like Mukunda, I told us on the top of a mountain before coming down to San Francisco. He said, we're going down to San Francisco to start a temple for Swamiji. And I asked him this really profound question, what is a temple? And he gave an equally profound answer. It is a storefront painted white. So that was the situation in those days. So now we're coming to the little storefront painted white. There wasn't a Vyasa sign. We didn't know that word. But there was what we called the Diyas. So Samshundra had made a little, upright box-shaped thing to sit on. And then this hippie came in and he looks, what are you guys doing? And we said, well, we're getting ready. This is going to be a temple. Swamiji is coming. And he looked at, the Diyas, and we explained that's where he'll sit. And he was thinking, should be a cushion. So he didn't go to IKEA. He went to the street, and there was a discarded sofa, and he took a piece, one of the cushions from the discarded sofa from the street, and God knows what had happened. We won't even think about it. And he put that on the diyas, so that's what, he was sitting on. Not extremely elegant, and definitely, nowadays it would have been shocking, but, hippies were the original recyclers in America. So he sat there, and the crowd of people, we'd say the place was packed. Well, yeah, the place was packed. It wasn't that much, it wasn't all that large, actually, So yes, it was packed. And he was explaining how these people, like hippies love to dress up. Like, there was a few Geronimos, who was a famous Indian. There was a number of Jesuses, Cleopatras, like this type of thing. But there were the suit and tie people also. People were interested, so they came. We had this idea that you should always use a lot of incense. So there was always this cloud of incense, in temples. I mean, now you're lucky if you can get smell a stick of incense. Oh, yeah, Lakshmana just indicates sticking out. Once you offer the incense to the Lord, you don't snuff it out. It's prasadam, very cool. It's a new thing. Don't do that, please. Anyways, Prabhupada looked out, and of course there was all kinds of people from the hippie culture, I call it the hippie sampradaya. And there was we go, Hare Krishna, they were going, peace and love, brother, peace and love, sister. Like that was the motto, that was the whole hippie thing, finding peace, finding love. And they wanted to know the truth, and that was the saving grace of the hippies. So Prabhupada looks around and he goes, somewhere in the lecture in the beginning, there is no love in the material world. Now that could have been something that we used to say, oh, that's a downer. Wow, what a thing to say to these people. But what was so wonderful was he explained how in the material world there wasn't real love, and the source and the origin of real love was Sri Krishna. So for myself, I felt very hopeful when he said there's no love in the material world, because it was really getting obviously things were, the peace and love mood of the hippies was starting to degenerate, and nobody was finding that love. And then Srila Prabhupada Swamiji came to give that to us, and as he was speaking to us, we were feeling from him a love. We were feeling love from him. And we were also finding ourselves falling in love with Swamiji. So that was a wonderful moment. And then after the lecture, there was another kirtan. And then that kirtan, very enthusiastic, the audience was joining in. And when he ended it, he was very good. It was a Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, that's it, ended. He didn't go on and on with a bunch of jai dry, and this one's dry, and that one's, and blah, blah, blah. It was like, and then a plate of fruit was brought out. And he started handing out these cut up pieces of apple, orange, and grape. And so for most people, this was their first prasadam. And it was just kind of amazing how just everybody was just taking this and feeling so wonderfully satisfied, you know. So, as I mentioned earlier, well, there's a couple things Bhakti Mark Swami wanted me to mention, because I have, you know, he's very concerned about the state of affair of kirtans. In fact, he has a good pile of Daidoi's books about kirtans. And I have my own experience with Srila Prabhupada regarding kirtans. And I was concerned because I didn't know what to think. And so I wrote to Prabhupada. So I'm going to read a letter that he wrote to me, and by that letter you'll understand what had happened. So we're in the UK, and I wrote my letter on the first, I didn't write my letter, he writes, I'm in the receipt of your letter undated. Prabhupada said that's like a person without, only a person without intelligence won't know the date, you know. So I was proving that I am a less intelligent woman. I do receipt of your letter undated, but his letter to me was the 28th of January, so it was in 69, so it was in that time. And I'm in due receipt of your letter undated, and I'm very pleased to note the contents. Regarding the Radha Sham chanting, which you have heard, it is not very good. In our temple, strictly Hare Krishna chanting should be given more importance. There's no harm in this mantra you have heard, but it is not very important. There are many such songs composed by common devotees out of sentiment, but our principle is to stick to the authorities and always remember that Hare Krishna is the prime authorized mantra. So this was, as I said, in January 68. But then he mentions to me, I'm very much encouraged to learn that you were bold enough to challenge any non-devotee as you did with that impersonalist yogi student. That should be the temperament of all our preachers. We should not be aggressive, but we should not tolerate any sort of nonsense. So one who says that God is not merciful because he has made one person happy and the other distressed is most nonsensical. This very statement affirms that man is a godless rascal. That the person who is saying that he's a godless rascal. And all of these so-called yogis are therefore rascals because they have no actual realization of God. Falsely, they think themselves of God. And their association should be avoided as far as possible. So then he goes back. So regarding this Shama Mataji Dasi from Vrindavan, does she sing Hare Krishna mantra or not? She's the one who is brought in this, Radhe Sham, Radhe Sham. If she chants Hare Krishna, it is all right. And if she does not chant Hare Krishna mantra, you should ask her why she does not do so. I'm not familiar with her spiritual master, Gaurangidas, but if he has taught her to sing this Radhe Sham song, then he is also not authorized. Thanking you once more for your letter. Please convey my blessings to your husband and child as well as all the other devotees here with you. But that is, coming verbatim from the words of the pure devotee. And then there was some talk in the lecture earlier about Grihastha life, and we have the heads of the Grihastha forum here. So this might be interesting to those who are Grihasthas or those who are thinking about taking that step. So the background of this letter, when we went to the UK, just like we're just like, not even 2 years into this new adventure of spiritual life. And we had many kind of like maybe misunderstandings or misconceptions. But we left America, and I had a suitcase in one hand and a baby in the other. That was it, because I couldn't bring more because I knew I had to be able to care everything with the kid. And then we're like living all scattered all over the place. And then we kind of get a place, but it's a temporary place, it's a warehouse. And in order to allow the others to be able to like find a place, I was doing the cooking, which included doing the shopping, and doing the laundry for everybody. So, I get this little basket with my kid went in, and, it doubled as a laundry carrier, to a grocery carrier, And oh, by the way, we didn't have a proper bathroom yet. We had a bathroom, a toilet, but we didn't have a shower, so we had to go outside to a public shower, much like His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada had to do when he first came. Yeah. So I was finding it a little bit overbearing, and plus, had to take care of the baby and the husband. So I'll read his answer. By his answer, you'll understand my question. You have asked if I found it difficult to carry on devotional service when in my household life. Now, that was kind of an impertinent question, actually, But as I said, we were very young in our efforts in Krishna consciousness. So he was very merciful to us, and he said, you have asked if I found it difficult. And yes, I did. But then he explains why he found it difficult, which was kind of different from how I found it. In my household life, I was strictly following the regulative principles. But my wife was reluctant to assist me properly. Therefore, I was obliged to give up their company. You try to take care of the Lord Jagannath as far as possible after doing your household duties. But you should be strict only in completing the 16 rounds of chanting. That will save you from all discrepancies. As a householder, even if there is some flaws in following the rules and regulations, it doesn't matter. You should try your best, and with Krishna's help, Krishna will help you. If you keep your heart in that attitude that you want to become a pure devotee and sincere devotee, you must be a sincere devotee. And Krishna will help you. You have to keep your heart in that way. That is your business. So this is, a very clear thing. He's not saying to drop chanting. In fact, that is the only thing I should be strict in. Just have to find a way to get it done. I know one devotee, an amazing devotee, 8 kids. I asked one neurotically, how did you do that? And she looked at me, how did you do that? She said, I put my hand in my bead bag at the start of each day. And everything I was doing, I kept my hand in that bead bag. I wasn't going to let these little buggers, that's what she called them, affectionately called her kids. I wasn't going to get these little buggers to get in my way of chanting my rounds. In other words, she made it a priority, which was what Prabhupada was also saying to me. So what is the time for the finish? Huh? Okay, so right now they have a half an hour. Okay, good. So I'm going to do the switch gears here, as I mentioned earlier. A last minute thing, but I feel just like reading Srila Prabhupada's words and his purports are vital to our spiritual lives. And at the same time, we've got devotees that we want to hear from these devotees because they have experience in spiritual life, because they read Prabhupada's books and the purports and made it a priority in their lives. So one such person is Rupa Prabhu. And just a few days ago, as I mentioned, it was his Vyasa Puj. It was being observed in Mayapur, where he now resides. I'm not sure if everybody knows why he's residing there, but I will say, because it's not a secret either, is that actually he has developed dementia. And it's something that's happening in our society, and it's very interesting to see how the holy name still remains prominent, and how the memories of Prabhupada still remain prominent, while other things may, not be so memorable or so prominent. So the other day was his Vyasa Puj, and it was being observed, nicely, tastefully, respectfully, and he was asked to read this particular homage to his spiritual master. And somebody who was there told me about it. And I thought, I want to hear this. And so I want to share it. I won't share the whole thing because we don't have the time, but I'll share some of it with you. And he titled it, The Miracle of a Vaishnava. We are all agreed that Srila Prabhupada was a miracle. Someone supernatural who entered into our mundane affairs and altered the normal course of duty of nature. The laws of nature, one's karmic destiny, and by extension, the destiny of the world, have been broken. It is essential to the nature of that miracle, the miracle of Srila Prabhupada's coming, that it keep on going, perpetuate after Srila Prabhupada's physical departure. After all, the miracle of Prabhupada lies precisely in his supernatural ability to create similarly miraculous persons. He was a devotee who could make others into devotees, who could in turn make others into devotees, and so on and so on. The archetypical Vaishnava miracle is thus beyond our ordinary wonder-working. Its miracle is to miraculously create more miracle creators. The Vaishnava miracle is one that perpetually grows. We're sitting here as proof of that. Consequently, those of us who aspire to be heirs of Srila Prabhupada need to make this our study. How does this miracle come to be made? It is our obligation to be able to answer scientifically those questions. How did Srila Prabhupada come to be a miracle creator? And how do we do the same? Miracles are mysterious because, according to Srila Prabhupada, miracle simply means that you don't know how it is done. So miracles are typically surrounded by secrets. So sages at times, they guard their secrets in order to dazzle the many. The yogis that guard their secrets to be dazzled the many. But Srila Prabhupada abhorred mystification. He kept nothing back. He gave away his secret. Like during our time, there was one yogi who came, and he was giving mantras. You give him a certain amount of money, he'd give you a mantra. Right? Some of you probably know who I'm referring to. Prabhupada kept nothing back. It was for free. In 1968, while speaking in Los Angeles on the anniversary of the disappearance of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada looked at the rows of American faces lifted up to hear him, and he was led to contemplate a miracle. How? By the will of Krishna, not the ordinary course of karma, the spiritual master and his disciple come together. He said, I was born in a different family. My Guru Maharaj was born in a different family. Who knew that I would come to his protection? Who knew that I would come to America? Who knew that you, American boys, Canadian boys and girls, who knew you would come to me? These are all Krishna's arrangements. We cannot understand how things are taking place. But then Sri Prabhupada goes on to explain how, by the grace of Krishna, the miracle of his presence in Los Angeles came about. This is Sri Prabhupada's Course in Miracles. In 1936, so this lecture was taking place on the 9th of December. So he says, in 1936, today is 9th December, 1968. That means 32 years ago in Bombay. I was then doing some business. All of a sudden, perhaps on this date, sometime between the 9th and 10th of December, at this time, Guru Maharaj was a little indisposed, and he was staying in Jagannath Puri on the seashore. So I wrote him a letter. My dear master, your other disciples, brahmachari, sannyasi, they're rendering you some direct service. And I'm a householder. I cannot live with you. I cannot serve you nicely. So I do not know. How can I serve you? Simply an idea. I was thinking of serving him. How can I serve him seriously? So the seed of the miracle is the desire to serve. Discontentment with his occupation and business, feeling himself incapacitated by the obligation of his ashram, and on the impulse, all of a sudden, he wrote that, all of a sudden, Prabhupada wrote his Guru Maharaj with a plea. He cried from his heart. He felt himself locked in a position which made proper service impossible. Yet, still the desire to do so was there. So he confessed his desire and his frustration to the spiritual master. And he continued speaking. So the reply was dated 13th December 1936. In that letter he wrote, My dear such and such, I am very glad to receive your letter. I think you should try to push on our movement in English. This was his writing. And that will do good to you and to the people you will help. That's amazingly profound to think like that. That will do good to you and to the people who will help you. That's what he said. This was his instruction. And then in 1936, on the 31st of December, that means just after writing this letter, a fortnight before his departure, he passed away. But I took that order of my spiritual master very seriously. But I did not think I'll have to do such and such thing. I was at the time a householder. But this is the arrangement of Krishna. If we strictly try to serve the spiritual master, his order, then Krishna will give us all facility. This is the secret. Although there was no possibility, I never thought. It was a startling and unexpected, it was incongruous and entirely improbable order. And Prabhupada took it very seriously, nonetheless, even though he could not envision any concrete circumstances in which it could be realized. He was then doing business in Bombay. He was entangled in household and commercial affairs. So this order just seemed remotely impossible, remote from reality. And at the same time, it was the last direct communication he received from his spiritual master. This gave it more weight. So he understood he must take it seriously, even though he was initially baffled. How in the world would it happen? As it turned out, by a miraculous divine intervention, it was the arrangement of Krishna. So Prabhupada says, yet something more is still required. For what prompts Krishna to make such an arrangement? The seriousness of the disciple. If we strictly try to serve the order of the spiritual master, his order, then Krishna will give us all facility. That is the secret. And he goes on to tell how, again, by Krishna's arrangement, he learned the secret. Although there was no possibility, I never thought, but I took it a little seriously by studying a commentary by Srila Vaishnava Chakravarti Thakur on the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, there is a verse, Vyasika Atma, Buddhir Ekaha Guru Nandana. So 241. In connection with that verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti gives his commentary that we should take the words from the spiritual master as our life and soul. We should try to carry out the instruction, the specific instruction of the spiritual master, very rigidly, without caring for our personal benefit or loss. So this here is the immediate source of Srila Prabhupada's inspiration, and the realization that he acquired from reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavad Gita 241 became the cornerstone of his life and achievement, the only secret to his success. And again, Srila Prabhupada directly and indirectly refers to this defining moment of his life when he was granted the realization to make that firm commitment that, come what may, he would make that order of his spiritual master his life and soul. Because of that commitment alone, Krishna has brought him to America and given him success. So the Prabhupada said, so I tried a little bit in that spirit. So he has given me all facility to serve him. Things have come to this stage that in this old age I have come to your country, and you are also taking this movement seriously, trying to understand it. We have got some books now, so there is a little foothold of this movement. And then Prabhupada requests his followers to enact the same commitment to his order that he has evinced to that of his spiritual master, his Guru Maharaj. So then he said, Prabhupada said, on this occasion of my spiritual master's departure, as I am trying to execute his will, similarly, I shall also request you to execute the same order through my will. I am an old man. I can also pass away at any moment. That is nature's law. Nobody can check it. So that is not very astonishing. But my appeal to you on this auspicious day of the departure of my Guru Maharaj, that at least to some extent you have understood the essence of Krishna consciousness. You should try to push it on. So execute his will is a play on words. The expression means, of course, carry out the order of somebody. But it is also the formal legal term to refer to the process by which a person's assets legally become those of his heirs. So by his commitment to execute Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's will, Srila Prabhupada inherited from him his specific potency to spread Krishna consciousness. On this occasion, Srila Prabhupada, the occasion of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's departure, so on his occasion, Srila Prabhupada is now making his will. I shall also request you to execute the same order through my will. By his will, Prabhupada has made us his heirs. He gives us instruction by which, if we accept Him as our life and soul, will transfer us to the same potency to make people devotees of Krishna. So then, what specifically are those instructions? And Prabhupada is very clear. At least to some extent, you have understood the essence of Krishna consciousness movement. You should try to push it on. People are suffering for want of this consciousness. As we pray daily about devotees, Vanchakalpatarubhascha, Kripasindhu Chapadittanam Bhavarendriyo, Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. A Vaishnava, our devotee of the Lord, his life is dedicated to the benefit of the people. And then he was mentioning to us, because at that time it was mostly Western devotees. You know, most of you belong to the Christian community. You know how Lord Jesus Christ said that for your sinful activities He has sacrificed Himself. That is in your determination of a devotee of the Lord. They don't care for personal comforts because they love Krishna or God. Therefore, they love all living entities because all living entities are in relationship with Krishna. So similarly, you should learn. This Krishna consciousness movement means to become Vaishnava and feel for the suffering humanity. Before Srila Prabhupada, this is not part of religious groups, but just a reminder, before Srila Prabhupada came to America, he went to the temple in Mayapur, and he was going there regularly before he came to America, chanting. And then at that time he was Grihastha, but then he took these sannyas vows. And now he's going to leave for America, and he goes back to that temple. And he's sitting in the back as he used to have done, but now in the sannyas dress. And he's chanting. And then he goes up to the pujari of that temple, and he's begging that pujari for his mercy. He said, my spiritual master has given me an impossible order to go to the Western world. People there are suffering because they don't know about Radha and Krishna. So that is what the suffering is about, our lack of knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And what does this feel for the suffering humanity? The Krishna consciousness movement means to become a Vaishnava and feel for the suffering humanity. So what does that concretely mean? So to feel for the suffering humanity, there are different angles of vision. Somebody is thinking of the suffering of humanity from the bodily conception of life. Somebody is trying to open a hospital to give relief to the diseased condition. Somebody is trying to distribute foodstuff in any poverty-stricken countries or places. These things are certainly very nice, but actual suffering of humanity is due to the lack of Krishna consciousness. These bodily sufferings, they are temporary. Neither can they be checked by the laws of nature. Suppose you have given some distribution of foodstuff in some poverty-stricken country. That does not mean this makes the solution to the whole problem. The real beneficial work is to give every person to Krishna consciousness. When we were in India with Prabhupada and that Bangladesh war occurred, Gurudas was mentioning that. And we're there in our land that had been acquired, but we have no facility there. And we are also living in tents. And we get some stuff from the United Nations, from UNESCO, to feed these people. And it was not palatable. We were even eating it ourselves because we had no other resources. And then at a certain point, the UNESCO people come in their jeeps, they see we're also eating, and they stop it because we're not supposed to. What are we going to eat, We were also suffering for want of food. Anyways, some devotees had the idea, before giving them the prasadam, we should make them chant Hare Krishna. Christians do this, they give out, but they hand you a plate and then they pull it back. Do you accept Christ as your Lord and Savior? You know, like, so Prabhu said, no, they're hungry. How can you make anyone chant anything but to speak of Hare Krishna? Feed them, and then they'll gladly chant. That was Prabhupada's part. Anyway, in short, Prabhupada's ordered to us, and to all of us, become a Vaishnava yourself and make other people Vaishnavas. Not all of us have received some specific tailor-made instruction from our spiritual master. And we may feel, or you may feel, you have failed to receive the spiritual master's gift, that we may have been left out of the will, but that's not so. Here, Srila Prabhupada very clearly delivers his orders to each one of us. And it has two parts. One is, we should become Krishna conscious, and two, we should give Krishna consciousness to others. Our full commitment, our single-minded intelligence dedicated to this order will itself make the order achieve rectification by the will of Krishna. So, I'll put a pause here. This is like a little less than half of this very brilliant offering. And if anybody's interested, I could forward it to you and you can read the whole thing. But I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. From day one that was there, 1967 July, San Francisco. Prabhupada came to our temple. He'd been staying in Stinson Beach trying to recover, but he decided he would go back to India. He wasn't recovering, and he decided he would go back to India to see if he could recover. Even by the Ayurvedic process of medicine, one recovers in their home place. Because, you're used to the sounds, you're used to the climate, the smells, everything. So Prabhupada was meant to go back to Vrindavan, his home, to try and recover. And he called us together in the temple, and he told us that. And he's sitting on the dais. I explained that earlier. The Vyasasana dais. He was sitting there, and he always sat very erect. And then he tells us, I'm an old man, I'm going to die any time. And we're thinking, we've heard that mantra, birth, death, disease, and old age. We heard that mantra, but we hadn't really experienced it. And now he's telling us, I'm an old man, and it was like, okay, this was the 60s. You didn't trust anybody over 30. When Shalali came to the temple in San Francisco, she was 35. And we're like, what does this old lady want? So Srila Prabhupada is telling us he's going to leave. And he says to us, he gives the order, I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. He's handing the future, the Hare Krishna movement, to toddlers that can barely walk, with to speak of what would happen in the future. And he's entrusting us. And he still does today. Help push on this movement. It's a standalone order. It wasn't just for us then. It's for all of us here and now and in the future. Because this movement is going to continue, even though we may sometimes do our best to derail it. It's going to continue. It is continuing. And it's only by those of us and those of you who help push on this movement. So I want to thank, British Rule for this really brilliant observation and essay, the Assemblage offering. And thank all of you for being here today, pushing on this movement. Hare Krishna.